Verizon, Comcast, Time Warner, and many of the other major ISPs have forgotten something very key, and they're throwing blame at all sorts of other companies. But they've forgotten an essential fact. They are not the internet, they are internet resellers. But we're going to slap some truth right on the face of these companies. And we also want to share some truth with you guys. We don't want to get into too many scary details because we can get lost in the details and get confused. And Wendell, I think that's kind of what they want. They want us to get lost in the details, and they want us to get confused like we are right now. And they want us to forget the simple truth that the ISPs are only a reseller. They are just here to get us on the internet, and all this high school stuff that goes on behind the scenes, all this bickering and all that garbage. We shouldn't be a part of that, and we should be getting exactly what we're paying for. If we're paying for 50 megabits per second, we should be getting 50 megabits per second, but we are not. So in this video, we're going to talk about what is going on behind the scenes that's really mucking up the internet. And then in video number 2, we're going to talk about some things that you can do right now to circumvent these problems and speed up your internet, fix your YouTube, fix your stuttering in Netflix, make your Twitch run smoother, and also encrypt your data so that the ISPs cannot see what you're doing by using a VPN. That's what we do around here. So if you don't care about what's going on behind the scenes and you just want to speed up your YouTube and all that stuff, go ahead and click on the screen right now. It'll take you over to video 2 where we offer the solutions.
It is an absolute terrible mess.
It is a terrible mess. Let's lay some. I'll go ahead and let you get started here. And we got this nice document you put together on the screen. I'm bringing it up. These notes, by the way, are raw notes, and we're gonna have just a conversation about this. And it may seem like we're glossing over a few different things, but really there's more here. If you want to dig deeper, we're going to give you the right paths to take to find out all the information you want, and we're going to try not to get too confusing here.
The facts on the ground are the things that we want to look at first. And so, the amount of people that are interested in getting content from Netflix and Hulu and YouTube are what a lot of these ISPs are blaming their troubles on. But the ISPs, as we said, get their internet access from other companies, and these are so-called Tier 1 providers. These are major connectivity providers that provide long-haul connections cross-country and across the globe. One of those providers is Cogent. Cogent provides a lot of connectivity for Netflix and for Amazon with their AWS cloud and a whole bunch of other companies. And, truth be told, Cogent has in the past, not behaved like a Tier 1 ISP and that kind of thing. But the situation that we're in is that the ISPs that you guys subscribe to, you pay them for an internet connection. And the ISPs like Verizon and Comcast and Time Warner then pay companies like Cogent and Tier 3 and other top-level Tier 1 internet providers for access to the internet. And the problem is that Verizon and Comcast don't have enough connectivity to Cogent, and so they're not throttling Netflix. They're just allowing their links to become saturated.
That can benefit them because they do offer competing. A lot of them offer competing. Competing platforms. Television is a major competing platform. A lot of times people look at it and they're like, "Well, Verizon doesn't really have anything that directly competes with Netflix." Television directly competes with Netflix. Streaming video on demand to your television directly competes with Netflix. So they do have some incentive here to just let the connections turn into saturated wet noodles so that all of the bandwidth that goes down them is going to stutter and you're not going to be getting your full 50 megabits per second. But Wendell, why the hell is that our problem?
Well, you got to look at this. The cable TV industry is dead. It is a walking dead person. It is absolutely, there is nothing left there. It is a corpse. Everything is finally a la carte television. There is no reason not to have a la carte television. You've got it with Netflix, you've got it with Hulu, you've got it with other video on demand services, even like Redbox, which is studio owned. It is everything a la carte. Cable TV is dead, and they just don't know it yet. There's 3 things you've outlined here, and it's what the ISPs want. So this is how delusional they are. They're carrying a lot of traffic for Netflix, right? They don't think they should be responsible to deliver that to their customers because they're carrying so much. They want Netflix to be responsible, for what we're paying for. We're paying for the internet connectivity. Yeah, their argument seems to be that they shouldn't be responsible because before streaming video, it was enough connectivity. And it's like, well, but wait, you haven't really upgraded your network. I mean, of course, more people are getting on the internet and doing more things with the internet, it doesn't really make sense to us that they would argue that, status quo, we shouldn't have to upgrade our network is a valid argument. But here they're saying, well, Netflix is chewing up a lot of our connectivity. We can't carry that. That's one of their arguments.
They also think that, Netflix should be paying for access to their subscribers. So now a lot of the ISPs think that their subscriber base is a resource. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, that's really a sign that the ISP has gotten too large. When Verizon, I mean, at the end of the day, if you accept that Verizon and Comcast are ISPs and they're reselling internet access, and you've got a company like Netflix where the customers have a direct deal, the customers of Verizon and Comcast have a direct deal with Netflix to deliver video over their pipes, it would seem to me that if Comcast and Time Warner and these other ISPs are not delivering enough internet connectivity to deliver that, they're not living up to their end of the bargain on the ISP side with the customers, and they're interfering with Netflix's direct business with the customers. So I think on two grounds, even before you get into net neutrality, because technically this is not even net neutrality, this is just letting the network saturation get to a point where it's a bad experience. But it seems to me that these ISPs are interfering with a business transaction strictly between their customers and Netflix, and I just don't see that as a valid argument.
All this stuff starts with the kernel of truth, and it is true that Netflix may be responsible for the 33% of the internet traffic. That's huge. That's ridiculous. Netflix is one of the only major companies that is really using the internet the way that I thought that a lot of other companies were going to be using it now, to stream tons of data. I mean, they advertise 50 megabits per second, but we're not getting 50 megabits per second because everything's just too freaking clogged.
Yeah,
now,
we really would have to take a look at it. So it's like, if their argument is that, this is a crazy amount of traffic, we shouldn't have to carry this much traffic, it costs too much, blah, blah, well, let's break it down. Let's see how fast it is and how much it costs and exactly what volume of data we're looking at. Because, ISPs are selling 10, 20, 50, 100 megabit packages now. Is that really a lot of data? Well, Netflix has some published stats, and we did some of our own testing with a proxy. The absolute largest full 1080p HD video that Netflix has is 2.8 gigabytes per hour.
That's a really nice encode. That's some really high quality encoding, but that's 800 kilobytes per second.
Yes, but ISPs sell their connectivity in megabits, so we've got to do a little math with that, but that works out to about an 8 to 10 megabit connection at the high end. Now, this is the absolute worst case scenario, overhead factored in. You're talking about your ISP saying that they don't have enough internet capacity to stream you a 10 megabit movie.
But if you're someone who's paying for 50 and you're stuttering on Netflix, just remember that movie is not going any faster than 10 megabits per second. What are you paying for again? 50, 20? Even if you're paying for 10, that should be just fine. I mean, really, it should be just fine.
And so think about if you're streaming like 720p. 720p is like half the size. And so that's down to 5 megabit. And so if you can't even, and that's again worst case scenario, because there are a lot of movies on Netflix, especially like standard def and television stuff, it's not 1080p, it's 720p or 480p even. And so we're getting down around 5 megabit, 6 megabit, 3 megabit, 2 megabit. And so these ISPs are like, oh no, we can't manage this connectivity. That doesn't even make sense. You got to look at it. You got to go even a level deeper. So part of an ISP, half of it is providing connectivity to you, and half of its connectivity to the internet. Now, with Comcast and Time Warner, on the cable side of things, those are all digital services now. They can deliver you set-top box movies. Those are digital. So this isn't a problem with the last mile. Sometimes you hear that half of the business where we're talking about your connection to their network as the last mile. So the last mile is good enough for them to stream you movies from inside their own data centers at 50 megabit or 10 megabit, as we've seen with Netflix. And so the real problem here is the internet connection, and that's where Cogent comes in.
So as everything goes across the country, they generally don't pay anything for peering. It's just they
think of it like a consortium of peers. There are a consortium of companies you've never heard of that operate the core networks that are the backbone of the internet, to which everyone subscribes. Now, those companies that work together to do the backbone of the internet, it's in their best interest not to charge one another especially if they carry a comparable amount of traffic for one another. It's a you scratch my back, I scratch yours kind of thing. It has always been that way. And it's also true that a lot of the traffic that's carried is basically equivalent. I mean, it's not byte for byte exactly the same, but for this tier 1 ISP and that tier 1 ISP, they carry a comparable amount of traffic. They build out their own infrastructure and connect to one another. It doesn't really matter if the traffic's coming or going. It's just they're part of the core infrastructure, and that's called peering. They don't charge each other. They make their money from charging like the tier 2 and lower people to connect to them. And that's called transiting.
The big problem here, and the reason you're experiencing stutter, is because of a lot of the bickering that's going on behind the scenes, and the fact that a lot of the different routes are completely saturated. Like, Cogent is Netflix's ISP, and they bicker back and forth, and a lot of times people will say that Cogent doesn't play nice, and then Verizon doesn't play nice, and they fight about all the traffic, and then Cogent's like, well, you guys should give us money because so much data is moving between this connection right here. They could route it in different ways, but they just argue. I think they enjoy the fact that it's completely saturated. It gives them a point to argue, and it also makes Netflix stutter, which I guess they're probably not upset about that at all, because it doesn't really hurt them, because it makes their services more, I guess, applicable. Would you agree with all that?
I'd like to see Netflix modify the thing so that when it stutters, it's like, oh, this is the work of your ISP doing things. But it's really not. You got to be careful here, because it's not technically necessarily the ISP, because it's even more complicated than that. I mean, you can get into a situation where Cogent has connections all over the country, and Verizon has connections all over the country. And so one of the things that's probably a part of their spat about this is it's convenient for Cogent to hand off the traffic in California, but Verizon may want Cogent to hand off the traffic in New York. And so the difference there is that the packets travel cross-country from Netflix on Verizon's network or on Cogent's network. Who's handling the traffic? Is it internal? Is it external? And so, I think that some of the stuff that comes from this is partly negotiation there. But there's also an elephant in the room here, too. And that is Netflix has offered to supply hardware, caching hardware, to Verizon and Comcast and others, so that they don't even have to. The traffic for Netflix doesn't even hit the internet. It stays purely internal. But this has been refused.
So you're telling me that Verizon's customers wouldn't even have to travel through Cogent or anything else to get to Netflix? Netflix offered to cache all of mostly the most used movies, like a huge...
Yeah, it was like the top 73% or something like that. Yeah.
And they'll just install it right there. So
free hardware.
Yeah, free hardware right there. And all they have to do is plug it in, and then all the customers from Verizon will have access to that, and there won't have to be any peering nonsense or any bickering like that. So you're telling me that the ISPs have refused that?
Yeah, these large ISPs have refused that, but a lot of smaller ISPs have taken it. I mean, obviously, Netflix has their own CDN, and they've got thousands of these boxes on the internet doing this. But these other ISPs are so large that they're saying, oh, well, it won't scale, or, oh, we don't want to have other people's hardware in our data centers, and blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, you're trading service fees for, a few dollars of electricity, and that is always going to be cheaper than peering. And our VPN solution, it also costs more money, because with the VPN solution, instead of going through Cogent, you might go from Verizon to Tier 3, who's the VPN's ISP, and then from Tier 3 to Cogent. And so, like, Tier 3 and Cogent have a peering agreement, and that works really well. But the ISP is still paying for transit to that other network that your VPN is on. And so somebody's paying for that somewhere, and it's really kind of dumb of the ISP to, because Cogent's cheaper. I guarantee you Cogent's cheaper than anything. That's why we're in this mess in the first place.
I guess the ISPs, they don't really know what's going on when you're on a VPN. They can't see your packets. They don't know what websites you're going to. It's just raw data. And it seems like as soon as I switched over to a VPN, I was able to get the advertised speeds from my ISP almost all of the time, because the packets were just going the shortest route. That's really what's happening. And it's almost like you're bypassing all the nonsense when you use a VPN, but not all VPNs are the same, and not all of them are going to give you faster performance in all situations. It's just going to route your packets differently. That's all.
It's not even really that the packets are taking the shortest route. It's not. We struggled to come up with analogies that made sense for this for you guys, as we were talking about, like peanut butter deliveries and stuff like that. But
we had the most ridiculous analogies ever.
But it's part of it that makes sense sometimes is, with Cogent, your like if Cogent were I-95, your ISP is like, oh, you guys are headed to Netflix. Oh, everybody get on the I-95, and the I-95 is completely, totally saturated, bumper to bumper traffic going 5 miles an hour. Nobody can get anywhere. That's basically the situation with Netflix. But if you go through a VPN to get to where the VPN is, you've got to get on the I-295, and then you go from there to Netflix. You never even get on I-95, and so that's why it worked.
Maybe you drove a couple extra miles, but there was no traffic.
Yes.
So that's why it's really faster.
Well, look, the facts on the ground are that these ISPs, when they're selling internet access, are in the business of reselling internet access to their customers. The facts on the ground are that they've got a 50 meg service or a 20 meg service or whatever that they can't necessarily deliver on because they're allowing their links to the internet, the thing they're reselling, to become saturated. That's a sign they need to upgrade those ports. Yeah, it's going to cost more. Yeah, they're going to have to pay for it. But this is at a time when they're reporting record profits as well. So you guys are paying for this. It doesn't make sense to allow them to double dip, I think. The fact of the matter is that as long as the internet has existed for peering, people that do peering do not pay one another for that traffic. They don't use the traffic behind it as a negotiation tactic or as a weapon or as an instrument of mass destruction or whatever you want to call it. Those are all sort of the historical and current facts of the situation. And when you look at it in sort of that lens, it becomes clear what's trying to happen here.
I feel like we may be too nice right now. These guys are all doing crack. I mean, they're really all doing crack. And they all have competing services in the television. And guess who paid for the infrastructure of the television? We did with our taxpayer dollars. We pay for this freaking stuff. So they are benefiting. They can't take any of that money and put it into infrastructure upgrades or upgrading connectivity, something like that. They can't do any of that stuff. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, there was a Business Week article, I think it was Business Week, that came out not a week ago that said that these companies are hoarding the cash. They are not reinvesting in infrastructure. So clearly they have no intent to upgrade. Google Fiber just named 9 cities. I don't think it's a coincidence that in those 9 cities, DSL-based providers like AT&T are the incumbent provider because DSL is inherently slower than cable on the whole in America. So I think that things like that point toward these giant corporations using their giant corporate states to basically make everything worse for everybody. And like Picard said in First Contact, the line must be drawn here, this far, no farther.
No further. Here, this far, no further. There, I have to do that.
Netflix should not negotiate with terrorists. We need to show solidarity and understanding to Netflix and companies like Netflix, and perhaps to a certain extent with Cogent, because if the selling of peering arrangements happen, it will not be good for the internet as a whole, and it will take American internet, which again, facts on the ground are that Americans pay more per megabit for both wired and wireless connectivity. Study after study after study is showing that Americans have been completely screwed by this. So that's the situation, and if it's going to get corrected, we've got to start trying to turn the ship around, one thing at a time. It's not going to happen overnight, but this kind of thing should not be allowed to stand.
And we cannot forget the 1996 Telecommunications Act. It took a lot of our tax dollars and reallocated it as tax breaks or something like that. But we essentially gave a lot of tax money to these major companies, these major ISPs, so that they would upgrade the internet infrastructure, and they haven't done it. So they took all the money, they're hoarding a lot of cash, they're making record profits, and they can't give us a stable connection to Netflix that's greater than 8 megabits per second. What the hell is going on? This all screams, all this bickering and nonsense, it all screams of the fact that they just do not want to shut down their old school businesses like telephone and cable, because the internet is a huge conflict of interest for them. That's the biggest problem right there.
As cable television, the old guard cable television industry dies, it is only going to get much worse. I'm not saying that regulation is the answer, because every time the government gets involved with anything, it usually is worse. But if you look at the 96 Telecommunications Act, the stuff in the original act, the communications companies got a ton of stuff, and they really only were asked to do a few things in the 96 Telecommunications Act. In the time since then, they haven't provided any of the things they were required to provide, either by oversight or because the laws changed. So as a result of that, they literally got everything that they wanted, and even the stuff that they didn't want, they still didn't have to do that. And we do not have a broadband utopia in America. No one would say that we have a good broadband situation in America. That is crazy. This is going to continue down this path until we spread the education to other people. You as the audience have to take this to other people and explain it to them in ways that they can understand and in ways that make logical sense, because the propaganda or whatever you want to call it, or these are lies, and the lies do have nuggets of truth in them, but it's up to the audience to really look at this and understand it for themselves and then spread the message, because otherwise it's just going to end badly, as it has been for the last 30 years.
Yeah, you guys out there, the people watching this, are really going to be the evangelists that spread this message to your parents, your friends at parties, and that sort of thing. And a lot of people are not going to understand this, so I'm going to distill it. And if you're still watching, here's what I'm going to say about this. Just tell them, guys, remember, your ISP is a reseller. Ask them if Netflix or YouTube stutters, and then tell them that, hey, that's only like 6 or 7, 8 maybe megabits per second. What are you paying for? 20, 50? Well, you're obviously not getting it. They're not reselling correctly. They've been given options to upgrade their connectivity. They haven't done it. They've been given tax breaks. Money coming out of our pockets has gone to these guys. They have not upgraded their connectivity because there's a major conflict with their current old school businesses. That's all you really need to say, and hopefully it'll click with them and they'll understand, because the more people that understand, the more likely something is to change. And let's not forget one more thing about the 1996 Telecommunications Act, and that is, while they were fighting for all this, they were promising, to make these amazing changes, and at the same time they were telling the Congress and everything, well, in order to do this, you guys are going to have to deregulate like hell. We can't do it with all these regulations in place, and we want to change the world, and in order to do so, we've got to be able to do anything. And so Congress said, oh yeah, let's deregulate everything, and now that's pretty much been the death of net neutrality. You see how this all came around?
If you're thinking that maybe Cogent is overcharging or something like that, no. Because of the whole peering situation, if Cogent is going to overcharge and charge Comcast or Verizon or whoever a bunch of money for their internet connection, there's nothing to stop those ISPs from buying connectivity from someone that peers with Cogent. So in that way, you've got a pretty effective price control that has worked since the beginning of the internet. There hasn't ever been a situation where an ISP is so large that it can throw its weight around and sort of rock the boat.
Well, let's also think about this. I mean, Netflix shouldn't have to pay the ISPs because we're paying the ISPs and they're just reselling the internet. But Netflix knows that they're huge and they know they're sucking up a lot of bandwidth. They've offered to do something about it, and they've all said no. They just want to keep fighting, and they want to keep the connections slow and stuttery.
And let's not forget that Netflix is paying for ample connectivity from Cogent, same as Amazon, same as anybody else.
What we really need to do right now is, of course, now that we know about all this, it's really going to be, that's all, you just need the information. But what you can do right now is just sign up for a VPN. So we're going to show you how to do that. The other benefit of a VPN is that they can no longer see what websites you're going to. Like right now, Comcast, Verizon, all the major ISPs, they can see a nice little list of every website that you go to. They can read all your packets. Even if you're opening up Chrome and using whatever that private browsing mode, they can still read everything there, everything you're doing. So a VPN will take care of all that. A VPN will take the fast route to get to your packets, and you'll notice that YouTube and Netflix and everything is going to be much smoother. So just go ahead and click on the screen, check out our second video. We'll have a little bit of fun over there and get you guys going with a very easy to use VPN and give you guys some pointers as to how it all works. So we'll see you over there. Is there anything else you want to say in closing, Wendell?
The only reason it works is because it's taking the less congested route, and that's really the only difference. You might try like the $4 a month plan and just for experimental reasons and just see what happens.
Yeah, I think you'll be quite surprised. It's like they give you a month for $4. So anyway, we'll see you guys over there. And there's some links on the screen. If you guys appreciate these videos, please consider donating with tech support up there and shirts and all this other stuff. So yeah, I've said everything. So I'll see you next time.